Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, the host of this show. And if you are new to listening to my podcast, I interview smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs and agency owners from all kinds of different organizations, ranging from, we've had Netflix, we've had Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation, Blizzard. We've had thought leaders like Gary Vaynerchuk on here. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. Quick shout out to Gianna Barrett, First Page Strategy, a recent guest of mine, who I asked her who she's grateful for. Is one of the questions I love asking. And she mentioned today's guest. His name is Tim Kilroy, and he helps digital agencies and digital agency owners to generate more revenue, profit, and happiness without working 1 million hours a week, without being salesy or doing anything else gross. I love that language. That just really speaks to so many of us. He's worked with hundreds of different agencies to help them with all kinds of different problems. And he's got a group program as well, which we'll talk about as well. He's also the host of the Kilroy Report Podcast. So you'll have to check that out on your favorite podcast player. And of course, this is brought to you by Rise 25, my company, where we help B2B businesses get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And you can learn more about what we do at rise25.com. All right, Tim, a pleasure to have you here today. And we were chatting beforehand about your journey into the world of agency ownership. And now you own agencies and you coach agency owners as well. So you got your foot in different pots, so to speak. But I want to start with this story of after the dot-com meltdowns. We're going back about 20 years here. You had your own dot-com meltdown to contend with, and found that's how you journeyed into the life of an agency owner, because that's what you had to do. So tell us the story about how that started.
Yeah, on January 2nd, 2001, I couldn't log into my email.
Sounds like a lot of Twitter employees in the last few weeks.
Yeah, so so then I reached out to the IT group, which was normally like on top of it, and they didn't respond to me, which is very weird. It's like, this is weird, huh? And then at about 9:30 or so, there's a knock on the door, and the FedEx guy was there with the letter saying, "Hey, Tim, you've been fired."
The FedEx guy?
Yeah, the FedEx guy. I got fired via a letter.
Oh man, jeez.
The company that I was working for announced they were shutting down the business unit.
Wow.
And so there it was. Had been married just bought a house, had a kid on the way, newly married, and then all of a sudden there was no income. It was very bad. And so and so I started thinking, okay, great, I got to get a job. And in 2001, there were not very many jobs for online marketers.
Wasn't as much of a thing quite yet.
Well, no, I mean, it had been. I mean, people were spending bunches of money, but then the dot-com crash happened, and all of a sudden, like, being online stupid, and we're not going to invest in that, is dumb. And so the skills that I had developed over the past couple of years, which, evolved around, marketing and content distribution and all that sort of stuff, nobody needed them. And so I was looking really hard for a job and couldn't find anything. And I couldn't find, nobody wanted my experience. And so I went from somebody who was, sort of at the cutting edge of what people were doing in the marketing world to the cutting floor. Nobody wanted to hire me. And so after finding out that, at that point I was like, I just couldn't find a job. And I had this mortgage to pay, and and a wife who, like, she loves she wanted to eat every day.
Sure.
Which is weird. I mean, she had a job, but okay, so I wanted to eat every day too, because it was one or the other of us. And so I just thought, well, heck, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And so I just thought I would just reach out to some of the people that I had met and worked with. And all of a sudden, I got a client, and then another one, and then another one. And then all of a sudden I had an agency, and it was like the worst of all possible agency constructs, because, well, so I had no idea how to delegate anything. I'd never, I'd been a manager in a retail store, but never managed professionals before. And so I didn't know how to delegate or manage or organize. And so I just didn't do any of those things. And so I built this agency, which is like, I was the hub and everybody was a spoke. And, and so every project had to touch me or go through me. And also I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I said, if it had to do with marketing and sales, I said yes to it. So we did things as diverse as sponsor or working or organizing a window painting thing for a local business, and doing paid search advertising for an online battery seller.
Okay. Yeah. And naturally, those two, totally connected.
And right, simple, right? Yeah. And we also and then we did a little bit of software development for somebody who's doing a cool thing. And and I could talk about all this stuff. I couldn't do any of it necessarily. With a certain thing I could, but all the other stuff, like I could, I was smart enough to know, like, oh, this fits with that, and that goes there. But I didn't know how to put together a project. I didn't know how to put together a team. And so, but the one thing I could do was hustle and sell. And so, after a couple of years, we were pretty big. I mean,
still everything going through you though.
Yeah. That was back in the days when $1 million a year was a lot of revenue.
Yeah.
But we were running out of cash because I couldn't keep up with the billing. And I didn't know that I was big enough to hire somebody to do that stuff for me. And I was too dumb to ask people for help, because I thought, well, people just knew how to do this. And so I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know who to ask. And so we got to the point where, frankly, we were starving for cash because I was way behind on the billing. And by the way, you should note that if you've not billed somebody for 6 months,
they're not happy to get that bill.
And then you send them a giant bill and are expecting to pay right away.
Nope.
They don't do that.
No.
They don't really like that at all.
Yeah.
And so, we ended up, we and I was so stressed out because I was working 50 million hours and, struggling to make payroll because we didn't have the right cash flow, and just all the crap I just didn't know how to do. And, and then I ended up shutting the business down because I had to shut down. I had to stop. I could not take the stress and the agitation and the pressure and the constant juggling. I just couldn't take it for another second. And so I had brought in some business partners to help out with all that stuff. And then they didn't bring the kind of relief that I expected.
Well, were they too similar to you, or what? Why were
they? No. They were like bookkeeper accountant sorts. But they didn't know anything about the business. And so we could never get to a spot where it was, where they understood what the business needed, where I was able to explain it. They were not able to help with operations. So they were just this giant cost center.
Yeah.
and it was miserable. So one day I had a meeting with them, and I just said we're done. Like I'm just gonna wind it down.
That must have been so painful.
Yeah, it was, and I was left in this big giant hole of debt. It was so ugly that, they had to call in FEMA. It was really bad. And so, here we are in 2004, I guess, late 2004, and I've just got this skill set and this understanding of marketing, but I didn't know how to run a business at all.
So what did you do? I mean, did you have a plan, or was it just like, I need relief from this, so I'm going to shut it? No plan.
No plan. Like, I just knew I couldn't do it another day. And, and I was so desperate for help that I worked with these guys out of need and desperation, but and so I actually ended up making a bad deal with them. And so their compensation was outsized to the value that they were bringing. And so I took myself out of the frying pan and put myself into the fire. So I eventually just shut it down.
Wow.
I just couldn't do it anymore. And I must say, the drives, and this was the back in the days when people actually met in person and stuff. And so I remember we met at this hotel lobby in Burlington, Massachusetts, and the 15-minute drive home from there was one of the happiest I've ever had.
Because you just felt a sense of relief.
Yeah, even though there was nothing to be relieved about, because they had all these debts to handle, and I had to take care of letting employees go, and I had to take care of winding down customers and all that sort of stuff. But it was finally done.
Yeah.
And I could take a breath. And then I realized, when I got a job a few weeks later, as it turns out, I'm just a terrible employee. Like, my entrepreneurial stint fundamentally ruined me as an employee.
How long did it take you to realize that? And did you have like a realization, like, oh crap, what am I going to do? Now I'm in a job and I need to quit it, or what was that like?
Well, it took a couple of weeks. I mean, I was already carrying like this sense of failure, because this business that I built that was, reasonably successful, like, I had to shut it down because I was broken. I just could not handle it anymore. And so even just applying for jobs, I felt like a failure. And then when I took a job, I was like, okay, awesome. And at this point, we had a kid, and I was just thinking, like, okay, this is what responsible people do. Like, you go get a job and you do it, and you go home, and it's all good, and it doesn't matter if you like it or not. You just bring home the paycheck, because that's what your wife and baby need. And so that's what I did for a while. And then I realized, as people talk about the Sunday scaries now, like on Sundays, they don't want to go back to work.
Oh yeah.
Well, I had scaries on Sunday and Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday.
Well, this is while you're an employee.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just were miserable not doing it.
Yeah. And so then I thought, well, that's not the right, and so I thought it was the job. And then I got another job, and it was the same thing happened. And so I had two jobs in a very short period of time. Both were terrible. And then all of a sudden I was like, well, screw it. Now I'm just a consultant. I don't need to scale. I don't need to get really big, but I've got really good skills, and I'm just happier doing it on my own.
When you went to that, did you still have this feeling of like failure or an inadequacy, because you shut down one business, then gotten one job, then a second job, three kind of, things in a row that didn't go so well, and then you start consulting? Sometimes that would go to people's head.
At that same time, I also was diagnosed with ADHD. So here I am in my 30s, figuring out that there's a reason why I suck at all the stuff that there are people that I think are smart are really good at. And there's a reason why Mrs. Manise, my 5th grade teacher, would say that my desk was disgusting, and she would pick it up and dump it out all over the floor in front of the entire classroom. Like like suddenly my life made sense. And I just thought, like, okay, so this is who I am. There's, so this is why I've never really been happy working in a job. So being a consultant makes sense. And I was, I was able to learn or to remember enough of the bad lessons from my first agency, the Kilroy Group, to realize, like, oh, hey, cool. So, like, I need to charge what I'm worth. I need to make sure that the bills get paid. I need to say no to things. I need to focus on the things that I know I can do rather than the things that I think I can do. Because I think I can do everything.
Right. Yeah.
Give me YouTube, a butter knife, and an appendix. I'm sure I could figure it out.
Goodbye, ruptured spleen.
Yeah, and spleens, I don't think you need those, so it's not a big deal.
But, yeah, exactly right. A butter knife will take care of it.
But yeah, so there's stuff that I think that I can do. I can, I'm smart enough to be able to imagine it. But you know what? It's all about the execution. And this happened a lot in my first agency. I could see how to connect things. I could see, I could see how, if you took our little window painting exercise and you connected it with a mailer, and and then you did the same thing at Christmas time, with lights on it, that you get sort of a thing happening, right? Right. I could see that stuff, but I didn't have all the requisite skills to be able to organize all that stuff,
execute on it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, and also part of, for me anyways, part of ADHD is the ideas in my head are so crystal clear and beautiful, and they're pristine and electric, but it's really hard for me to express some of those, because those ideas are inextricably tied to my own experience. So in my head, oh, we're going to do something which is exactly like that thing that I did when I was 12. And I remember how that worked out, and I can see how those two things connect. And then I take that thing and it connects to something over here that I heard about one time. And then there was this book I read 3 weeks ago that was really good. And so all those things come together to make this. And all of that stuff is happening in real time in my head at incredible velocity. And I couldn't explain all of that stuff to other people.
Which makes it hard to manage people implementing it.
Yeah, and so I was so, and this is something that I warn my agency owners about all the time. The 5 words that will kill your business faster than any other. Never mind, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I was the king of never mind, I'll do it, because I didn't have the skill set to be able to explain myself to other people.
It's a challenge. So all this leads me to the next logical question, which is, how the heck did you end up founding another agency not that much longer later? So 4 years later, SpinShark.
Glutton for punishment. I don't know. A client, somebody that I met through one of my consulting engagements, terrific guy, really, really, really liked him. And he was selling, he had his business, he had a family business, and his family was selling it. And so he said, like, hey, listen, awesome. Like, we're going to sell our business in about 6 weeks. And as soon as the dust settles, like we should do something together.
Okay.
And so I was like, all right, that sounds okay. Like, I really liked this guy. He'd been, he and his family had been very successful. And he said, and he's got this idea where he was going to make a Woot killer. Do you remember Woot, which is now owned by Amazon?
Yes, it was a website, right?
And they used to sell, and they were a product distributor, and they sold like the leftovers.
Yeah, flash sale type of thing.
Yeah, and my favorite thing of theirs was the Woot bag of crap. So it would be like $7, and they just like throw stuff in a bag, and you'd get what you get.
Yeah.
But my partner had tons and tons of experience buying products from China. And so we were going to, we were going to build this Woot killer. And so because he was going to do all the sourcing, I'll do all the marketing. It was going to be beautiful. And then honestly, he and his wife were getting a divorce. And so that messed up him funding things. And so we thought, well, we've got this thing that's, that's working, that's happening. And so we got to fund it some way. So I knew a lot about search engine marketing and search engine optimization. So we went out and sold an SEO thing.
Got it. And you must have impeccable timing, because the first one was after 9/11 and the dot-com meltdown. And the second one was around 2008, right after the real estate meltdown.
Yes. Yes.
What are some of your thoughts on, especially we're recording this at the end of 2022, when the last 6 months, the NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, all the markets have been down. People are talking about this being a recession. What are your thoughts on building a business in a downturn?
I would say that it is the hardest time to build a business, but it will help you make a business that's hard to kill. Because if there's consistent uncertainty, you have to temper your vision with pragmatism. And so, not that you're not going to take big bets, because just the act of starting a company or deciding to grow a company, those are really big bets. You just have to do it with the understanding that there isn't a soft landing. So you really do have to, step incrementally towards your plan. And unlike so many businesses that I worked with, sort of in the the pre-pandemic years and the pandemic years when agencies were growing like crazy, if you start during a downtime, you don't have any expectations that you're going to go from zero to, exiting your business in a year. Like none of this like 0 to 7 figures in 90 days. Like that stuff was, it's never been true, but it's especially not true during hard times. So you build things more robustly because you have to. Because there's no rising tide to lift you up.
Yeah. Now that company, SpinShark, you end up selling it only about 1.5 years into it. What are your reflections on selling that early?
So in retrospect, I wouldn't have done that. If I were able to think about it from the outside, at that point, but we did it because it was what was best for the business. My business partner needed to get out, and we were also a really great strategic fit for a business called PM Digital at the time, which is now Assembly General or something. And we were just a terrific strategic fit there. And I did not And I didn't really reflect on my thinking that that I was a terrible employee, because I was assuming I was going to be able to be really entrepreneurial inside of that business, and I was to an extent. But what I didn't understand at the time is when you're sort of the last piece of the puzzle, when you complete the picture, when you complete somebody else's picture, like you are now servicing
their vision.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's not your thing anymore. It is hard to sort of to go from the visionary in your business to an integrator for your own business. And I think I certainly could have I certainly could have managed that better.
That's a common thing though, right? People sell their business and then they're challenged by having to work within the business that acquired them.
Absolutely.
You hear that all the time, right?
Yeah. And I think I wished I had just been again, more vocal about it, because again, I thought this was like something people just knew how to do.
Yeah. Now, before that, while you were growing it, SpinShark, in the year and a half before it became acquired, how did you approach that differently compared to the previous time, being mindful that the first time you'd so stretched yourself that you needed to shut it down?
I hired people not to help me, but rather to do stuff they were great at. And also I learned very, something that I realized as I was thinking about starting this second thing was, it wasn't my job to create happy customers. Because that's really what I was like. I was involved in every opportunity at the Kilroy Group because I thought I have to make these people happy. But then I realized that the best way for me to make the clients happy was to bring really good people to the task at hand. Because as I reflected and I understood my ADHD, like I knew that I couldn't handle all the stuff that we were going to sell. I didn't have the internal resources to deliver the clients what they needed or what they deserved. And so I thought, well, I better hire people who know how to do this, and I can tell them the way that I think about it and give them my little sort of intuitive take on these things, but I should let them do it because they're better at that part of it than I am. And what I'm really good at is understanding opportunity and then connecting stuff that maybe my team doesn't, they don't see the connections between these things.
Yeah.
Showing that, the results you're getting are tied back to the very first thing the client told you that they wanted to solve. Like that has always made sense to me. But, certainly in digital marketing, people are often they're focused on numbers that are easy for them to understand or for them to measure rather than doing the work to connect it to a significant business initiative.
So it also sounds like having that awareness that you had ADHD the second time around was a bit of a game changer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And taking ADHD medications really, it changed a lot of things.
Yeah. What other treatments have you, if any, or counseling or training?
Counseling, PM Digital so later Tenuity hired a coach, someone who's specialized in ADHD. And I realized, quite honestly, what the things that I've learned is that whatever system I create for something, so I'm going to have to change it because it's going to work for a month or a year. And at some point, whatever strategy I put into place will stop working.
Mm.
And so I get to treat my productivity, my output, and, as a laboratory. Because I know that everything that I try is only temporary. And so, and I've actually been able to take that thing that I learned about working with my brain, and I've been able to help my clients understand that there are very, very, very few decisions that they have to make that are like permanent, and so almost every decision you make as a leader in a service business has written, after it in invisible ink, comma, for now. Because you can change it. And so many business owners get paralyzed because they're afraid to make a mistake. They're afraid to make the wrong decision. But something that I have learned is those decisions are temporary. And if there's new information or a new circumstance, you can make a different decision about the same thing. So, for instance, you might think we need to go all in on ads to grow our agency. And then CPMs get too high. And instead of like investing tons of resources trying to optimize your ads, like it's okay to rethink that and say, you know what, maybe right now agency partnerships is the right way to go. And if agency partnerships sort of peters out, maybe it's time to really make systematic referrals work. And then maybe again, it's time to try ads, but maybe in a different way. And so the understanding that there is no right decision, there are only decisions that get you closer or further away from your goals. If you make a decision that brings you that pulls you away from your goal, well, awesome. You just have to make a decision to reverse that. And I really do think that understanding that any structure that I put in place to help keep myself on task, it's going to be temporary because something about my brain's going to change, or something, there's something that I didn't account for in the structure that I made. And so it's going to have to be adapted, and there's nothing static anytime. That has allowed me to help my clients make better decisions more quickly, and then also have the flexibility to know that changing a decision or changing your mind isn't a sign that you don't know what you're doing. It's a sign that you're actually hyper aware of your circumstances.
Now, I want to ask you, I know you spend about 75% of your time coaching other agency owners, 25% of your time actually doing the same type of work. So you actually own an agency now. But how did you get into, actually coaching other agency owners? Because hearing your background, the stories about the at least the first agency that you had, that didn't have the makings of someone who's like, I want to go and help others do this thing.
Yeah. So later after I left PM Digital and had to go client side for a while, and I made another agency, and then we ended up at Tenuity. And I knew at Tenuity, like this wasn't like I wasn't going to stay there for a long time because I just knew that about myself. So after I left Tenuity, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, to be honest. And I was doing a bunch of consulting for some SaaS companies and for some e-commerce companies, and that was really fun. But it wasn't terribly satisfying. Because, I was working with these companies where, I could help them make a big bunch more money, but they were already big companies in the first place. And it just wasn't very satisfying. And a friend of mine, whom I'd known from way back from my SpinShark days, said, we were talking, and she said that she was her revenue had been stuck for quite a while, 5 years, in fact. She was at like almost $1 million. And then 5 years later, she was still almost at $1 million. And she was really frustrated. And I said, well, you know what? Why don't we just, we'll just try this out. Like, I'll coach you. I'm not going to charge anything. We'll just coach you and we'll see what happens. And as soon as I started coaching her, like, the sun came out and there were rainbows and the bunnies came out to play and birds were singing. And I thought, like, holy.
Or for her or for both.
Yeah. For me, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing.
More meaningful than helping a already wealthy company make more money.
Yeah, because I was able to share my experience and think about her problems and provide some solutions. And she was able to implement them. And it made a difference.
And she's very coachable, I imagine, too.
Yeah. And I just felt like, wow, that is awesome. And if I were in a position to be able to coach for free, I would. But I'll tell you the thing that brings me the most satisfaction in my coaching business is just switching around two words. Switching around, can we do this? To, we can do this. And when I see my clients make that switch, like, that's the thing that I know, and that's what I need out of this relationship is when I can help someone suddenly, like, step into their own shoes, so to speak.
Yeah. We're almost out of time, and I love asking this question. So I'm going to ask, who are you grateful to? And when I ask that, sometimes people mention their family or they mention their team, and that's not really who I'm getting at. Usually what I'm looking for is more like, who are the mentors, who are the peers, who are the contemporaries, who are the business partners, who are the people that you would just shout out publicly, thank them for being there for you along the way?
So there, friends and family, obviously. The fact that my wife has stayed married to me for this long, outrageous. I don't know. There must be something wrong with that woman. But my first one-on-one coaching client, this really remarkable guy named Bastian Bellingar. He runs a company called Hustler Marketing. They're a great retention marketing agency. He was just so receptive and coachable that when I started helping him, they made leaps and bounds, like huge leaps in a very short period of time. And he was just so helpful in making referrals and giving feedback that and allowing the consulting to go beyond tactical and beyond strategic to personal, which was just so rewarding for me. And the fact that he was just a referral machine. I don't know that I could have gotten my business off the ground without his proselytizing.
That's awesome.
He's just an extraordinary guy. He's the only person I've ever met that has a therapist for his business.
Has a therapist for his business.
Yeah.
Interesting. Tim, this has been great. The Kilroy Report is the podcast. And where else can people go to connect with you and learn more about you?
TimKilroy.com is the best place. And also on LinkedIn and Facebook and all that sort of stuff.
Great, Tim. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.